What is the most petty but effective power move you have done? A new senior supervisor started at our workplace a few months ago and I would be working under him as a particular zone supervisor. I'm 30 so I'm out of the ordinary supervisor age and looks etc. Normally it's an old boy that's been in the industry forever. I see the new dude in the car park and go to introduce myself. He looks me in the eye as he's walking towards me, then slightly goes to my side and keeps walking as my arm is outstretched for a handshake and I'm halfway through introducing myself. I was standing there pretty baffled about how rude he could be, but then chalked it up to not realizing, so after he goes into the office and comes back out I assume he has found his bearings, so fast forward a minute or two and we both find ourselves at the coffee station and I go back in. Outstretched my arm and go, "Hey mate, I'm Co," and he cuts me off. "The milk's empty, can you get me another?" Just talks at me. Time to give the boys their pre-start before we get out there. About 40 of us and I'm giving them the talk. I had to introduce the walking erection called Darren. I said, "Everyone. Make Daryl feel welcome as he's our new senior supervisor. Everyone say hi Daryl." Hi Daryl. X40. Darren tries to interject to correct me so I talk over him and let the boys know let's get to work, so everybody left. It took him about 4 weeks to correct everyone separately for his real name, but even now people call him Daryl. Fuck you Daryl. When I worked at a grocery store I was in the meat department. We closed the counter at 8 and cleaned until 9. My department manager said if we finished cleaning early we could head out. But he was 9 to 5 so he wasn't around. I worked there for some years, and as the years went on one of the front-end managers that did closing didn't like us leaving early. It wasn't up to them. They were not my boss. At some point they implemented a policy where we had to call the front desk and they had to come verify cleaning was done and sign off on it. The manager that didn't like us leaving early would say he was coming when we called, but then he just wouldn't come till 9 to verify so that he could keep us there the whole time. So my solution was, after I finished cleaning I would just walk to the front desk and find him, and tell him I was ready. He would say, "Okay, be right there." And I would say, "Okay, I'll wait." And I would just stand right next to him until he went to check. He hated that. Our assistant manager has changed the schedule several times without notice, then happily tries to get us written up for being late, not showing up. I religiously document the schedule by photographing the screen, since we can't access it at home. After having to come in to HR twice on my day off to prove the schedule had changed, I began writing her up for every single time change without notification. She is let off the hook because I'm just a peon, but she still had to walk to HR to dispute them. A few other people started doing the same. When she had to answer for 5 instances of it in a week, she was reassigned back to floor nursing on another unit. I learned that my manager hated me and wanted to fire me, but I was so good at my job and well liked by the rest of the company that HR wouldn't let her. I showed up on time every day and completely ignored her. I would take smoke breaks and chum it up with the other department heads. When I finally got a better job and could escape her I gave her flowers. She was such a toxic bully. I've never encountered someone so deliberately malicious, and to this day I don't know exactly why she decided I was the main target of her scorn. I think it might be because I requested a day off to go to a wedding the second month I worked for her. After I left 7 others quit within a month, 4 on the same day. And then the new group didn't last 3 months. And then she got fired. Fuck you, you miserable cunt. Lost out on a promotion to leading hand. Construction to nepotism. Nevertheless tried to give the guy some advice when seeing some rookie mistakes popping up, which he promptly pulled rank and told me to follow orders. So me and the team complied with instructions to the letter, resulting in $500,000 damage and the communications for a whole town cut off and the company nearly going under. My director had minimal respect for me, but our corporate office insisted I be a part of the management team. Meetings are held at a rectangular table. I knew he'd sit at the head, so I arrived early and sat at the other head. He had to face me during every meeting. I worked in a call center that had a keycard security entry at all outside doors. My team supervisor was a tool who would penalize the smallest deviation from any rules, yet he ignored them when it suited him. One day when entering I realized too late that I had forgotten my keycard at home. A friend swiped me in. I was ripped a new one and told everyone had to swipe their own card or they weren't allowed entry. Under any circumstances. Fast forward about 3 weeks later. Supervisor went outside to smoke on break, and left his keycard on his desk. It was heavily snowing and probably 5 below with wind chill. I went to the break room past the door he was banging on and ignored him. About 45 minutes later he finally entered the building and called me to his office and asked me why the fuck I didn't let him in. I half-ass apologized and said unfortunately that was against company policy. My old business partner tried to enforce a non-compete even though I was only doing residential work with the business I started. We had previously had long email discussions and arguments where he refused to do residential work and was very clear he was only ever going to do B2B. The non-compete got thrown out 5 seconds into arbitration. Sadly, I never got to use the emails I had saved. After we left the courthouse I sat in my car calling every single customer I served when we were partners. Over 75% of them preferred my service over his and transitioned to my new business. I then called the only employee he had that actually knew what he was doing and worked hard and made an offer for what he was actually worth. His pay went from $15 per hour under old partner to $25 per hour plus monthly bonus plus paid training under me. The best part is that I had brought most of those customers on board his business, took all their calls, and did all the work for them. I didn't even think of calling them until he put the idea in my head when he was arguing with the arbitrator that I was trying to steal his business and thought, motherfucker, I was the one who built that entire part of your business. I wouldn't have ever called them if he didn't try to screw me. Last day at a job, been at the place for 5 years. Going round. Last chat with different folks in different areas. One guy who always tried to get a reaction from me, I walked up to him and said I never bothered to learn your name. Walked off happy. I regularly butt heads with the sales team, so when I saw the sales director at the front door fumbling to get his access card out, instead of opening the door for him, I stood there and watched him struggle. It's a glass door so he could see me standing 3 feet away, enjoying my coffee. Looked him dead in the eyes and smiled. Man, that felt great. I was an MA for a very wealthy, pretty arrogant doctor. They'd regularly not finish or even properly code charts, which means we don't get paid for anything we did, yet they never knew why we were losing money. They'd let the unfinished charts pile up into the hundreds and then task us with going through the notes oxygen mononitride our days off while they sat at home, cruised on their yacht, or, my favorite, left the country entirely for a vacation. And, they were a jerk to me and the rest of their overworked, underpaid staff. I was doing charts on their computer one day when I got curious and Googled, Medicare fraud. They didn't like turning off computers in the office, so evidently either I forgot to close the window or they checked their search history, because they seemed to notice this. For the rest of the time I worked there we never had to code a chart independently again and they were extremely nice to me. Now that I'm studying medicine, I realize that what they were doing was legitimately Medicare fraud and I just didn't know law. One of my former managers hated me because I was a robot who did their job and didn't want to attend pointless meetings every day to listen to her talk about weddings and babies when I had shit tons of work to do that she'd ironically demanded of me. Anyway, few months down the line I caught wind that she'd asked HR for pay raises for the other 2 members of our team who did the same job as me. I thought this a little odd as I'd outperformed them consistently for over 6 months, but it was personal for her. Knowing how incompetent and, quite frankly, dumb my manager was, I figured I'd be able to catch her out quite easily. As predicted, with a bit of digging around, I found an unprotected manager folder on a shared network drive accessible by the entire company, lol, that contained a range of juicy documents including 1 meeting notes between myself and my manager, as well as my manager and other employees. The notes on me were ridiculously negative with zero basis. I discovered pay rise request documents and other sensitive employee pay material, which resulted in a data protection breach. Fast forwarding a few months, after I won a tribunal case against the company, because they naively chose to try to protect her, and big payout, I found out that she had been demoted and is now working alongside the people she used to manage. I guess karma can be a bitch. The sad part is, I just wanted her to leave me alone and let me focus on my job. My ex complained all the time about me not doing enough for her. I stopped doing all I was doing for her and she apologized soon after when she realized just how much I was doing without asking for praise. I left her soon because in reality she wasn't doing shit for me. Worked with this guy that I simply could not stand. He was terrible at his work. He was a terrible person. Everything about him was terrible. It was so bad that I couldn't be in the same room as him cause every word that came out of his mouth was so stupid and ignorant. He would hit on every girl in the office, fuck up every single thing he did and become very aggressive if someone tried to correct him. A few months in at work, me and another guy would email our boss every time the guy did something wrong. In the end he of course got fired. On his last day he knocks on my office. He sticks his head in and says, "I just got fired and wanted to say bye, so. Bye." I said, "Hey guy?" He said, "Yeah?" I flipped him the bird and said, "I got you fired. Go fuck yourself." I was recently moving out of a toxic living situation. When I sat down with my 2 roommates at the time to give them notice, I agreed to pay all bills up until 30 days from that day, as a courtesy, and to try and maintain some semblance of a friend's BIP with the one I had known for 6 years. They started to nickel and dime me on everything and decided that they wouldn't give me my portion of the security deposit. So after I moved out a week later, they texted me for the rest of the bills. I did the math and came to the conclusion that everything I would have we owed would be less than my deposit. So I told them to just take what I owed out of my portion of the deposit. Felt good. I went to a Smash Bros tournament a few years back and during one of the sets the kid looked at me and said, "Yeah, I'm pretty good at this game. I won the last tournament here, so yeah." I looked at him and went, "Wow, that's pretty impressive." Game starts. I fucking bopped this kid. Don't even give him a chance. Absolutely destroyed him in front of his squad. He tries switching characters. I bury that character 6 feet deep and win the set. I get up and say, "Good game." He says, "Dang dude, you're pretty good." Little did he know, I was actually the guy that won the last tournament.